The phone vibrated against my kitchen counter, my father's name flashing on the screen. 10 months since I'd moved across the country, and not once had anyone in my family noticed I was gone. Now his voice boomed through the speaker, demanding my presence at my brother's wedding. "We need to look perfect," he insisted, as if I were merely a prop in their family portrait. When I refused, his threat was immediate disinheritance. The words that left my lips next weren't planned, but they were 10 years overdue. "You didn't notice I was gone for almost a year. I don't think you'll miss me at the wedding." And for the first time in my life, my father had nothing to say. Growing up as Maria Wright in our sprawling Connecticut estate felt like existing as a shadow. Our 5-bedroom colonial house, with its manicured gardens and marble countertops, was the perfect backdrop for my parents' obsession with appearances. Thomas Wright, my father, built his real estate empire through ruthless determination and an uncompromising drive for perfection. My mother, Eleanor, came from old money and knew exactly how to maintain the social standing that mattered so much to both of them. And then there was Andrew, my brother, 3 years younger, but somehow always the center of our family's universe. While I excelled in school, maintained a perfect grade point average, and pursued extracurricular activities that looked good on college applications, Andrew merely had to exist to receive praise. His mediocre report cards were celebrated while my academic achievements were expected. His participation in soccer was documented in countless photos, while my debate team championships went unmentioned at dinner parties. "Andrew's got such natural charm," my mother would say, beaming at him across the dining table. "He'll be perfect for taking over your father's business someday." I learned early that being invisible had its advantages. I could retreat to my room with books, develop my own interests, and build a separate life in the corners of our household. By high school, I had accepted my role, the reliable daughter who never caused trouble, never demanded attention, and therefore never really mattered in the family narrative. When I got accepted to Yale with a partial scholarship, my father's reaction was to remind me how much the remaining tuition would cost. When Andrew got into a state school with average grades, my parents threw a party and invited their entire social circle. "Your brother has such drive," my father told me at the celebration. "He'll really make something of himself." The irony wasn't lost on me, but I'd stopped expecting them to notice my accomplishments years ago. College offered freedom. I thrived in psychology classes, fascinated by family dynamics and the invisible patterns that shape relationships. I made friends who actually saw me, professors who valued my insights, and for the first time I felt like I existed as a person rather than an afterthought. After graduation and completing my master's in psychology, I established a small but growing therapy practice in Hartford, only 40 minutes from my parents' home. I specialized in family trauma, drawing on personal experience I never disclosed to clients. My apartment was modest but entirely mine, decorated in calming blues and filled with books on healing and self-discovery. Andrew, meanwhile, joined my father's business straight out of college. He drove the company car, wore designer suits, and laughed at all the right jokes at all the right country club events. When he started dating Stephanie Davis, daughter of my father's biggest business partner, my parents treated it like a royal coupling that would merge 2 dynasties. Last Thanksgiving marked the breaking point. I arrived at my parents' house with a homemade pumpkin pie and news about expanding my practice. My mother air-kissed my cheeks in the foyer, immediately commenting on my sensible outfit, before ushering me into the dining room where everyone was already seated. "Maria, you remember the Davises," my mother said, not waiting for my response as she adjusted the centerpiece. "Andrew and Stephanie have such exciting news." The entire 4-hour dinner revolved around Andrew's engagement to Stephanie. My father toasted their future. My mother discussed potential wedding venues, and the Davises spoke about the advantages of merging their family connections. Not once did anyone ask about my life, my work, or my achievements. "Maria, you'll help with the engagement party planning, won't you?" My mother's question wasn't really a question at all. "We'll need all hands on deck to make this perfect." I nodded automatically the way I always did, but something inside me had snapped. As everyone moved to the living room for coffee, I slipped into the bathroom and gripped the marble countertop, staring at my reflection. 32 years old and still orbiting around my family's expectations, still hoping for recognition that would never come. That night alone in my apartment, I opened my laptop and did something I'd never considered before I searched for therapist positions in Colorado. The mountains had always called to me during a college road trip, representing something vast and wild and free. By morning, I'd applied to 3 practices in Denver. 2 weeks later, I received a job offer from a wellness center in Denver that needed someone with my specialization in family trauma. The salary was comparable, the opportunity exciting, and the distance exactly what I needed. I accepted immediately. What followed was a whirlwind of practicalities. I informed my clients about my upcoming move, arranged for referrals to trusted colleagues, and gave notice at my apartment. I sold most of my furniture, packed my books and essentials, and booked a one-way flight to Denver. The only person I told was my best friend Abby, who helped me pack and drove me to the airport. "Are you going to tell your parents?" she asked as we sat in the terminal waiting for my boarding announcement. "Eventually," I said. "I want to see how long it takes them to notice I'm gone." Abby frowned, concern etched on her face. "Maria, that's kind of a big test." "It's not a test," I replied, though of course it was. "It's an experiment. If they don't notice, I'll have my answer about where I stand. If they do notice, and actually care, maybe there's something worth saving. And if they notice but only care about how it affects them, Abby knew my family too well, then I'll still have my answer." I hugged her goodbye, boarding the plane with equal measures of terror and exhilaration. I didn't tell anyone else. Not my mother, who texted occasionally with family obligations disguised as invitations. Not my father, who only communicated through my mother anyway. And certainly not Andrew, who was too absorbed in his engagement to notice much beyond his own reflection. I simply disappeared from Connecticut, landing in Colorado with nothing but 2 suitcases and a determination to build a life where I was visible, valued, and valid. Denver greeted me with crisp mountain air and endless blue skies. My apartment hunting led me to a small but modern 1-bedroom on the 3rd floor of a converted factory building in the Reno district. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a view of the distant Rocky Mountains, a daily reminder of why I'd chosen this new beginning. The first few weeks passed in a blur of practical arrangements. I secured my therapy license transfer, set up my new apartment with secondhand furniture that felt more authentically me than anything I'd owned before, and began working at the Aspen Grove Wellness Center. "We're so glad to have someone with your background," Linda, the center's director, told me during my first week. "Your perspective on family trauma is exactly what our client base needs." It felt strange to be valued for precisely the experience and expertise my family had always dismissed. My client list grew quickly, and I found myself connecting deeply with people struggling to define themselves outside of toxic family dynamics. The irony wasn't lost on me. Meanwhile, my mother's texts continued to arrive sporadically, generic and impersonal. "Hope you're doing well, and Andrew and Stephanie set a date for next June, and your Aunt Sarah asked about you at Bridge Club." Never questions about my life, never any indication that she'd noticed my absence from family dinners or local events. I kept my responses equally vague. "Work is busy, and thanks for letting me know, and give my best to Aunt Sarah." Small talk with strangers would have contained more substance than our exchanges. In contrast, my new life in Denver grew increasingly rich with genuine connections. I joined a hiking group and met Jenna, a pediatric nurse, with a boisterous laugh and zero tolerance for pretense. Through her, I met Drew, a software engineer who invited me to trivia nights at a local brewery. "Family's what you make it," Drew told me one evening after I'd shared a sanitized version of my background. "My biological relatives are disasters, but these people," he gestured around the table at our trivia team, "they're the family I chose." The concept of chosen family resonated deeply. For the first time, I surrounded myself with people who asked real questions, remembered my answers, and seemed genuinely interested in my thoughts and feelings. The constant tension I'd carried in my shoulders began to ease. I slept better. I laughed more easily. 3 months after moving, I met Lucas at a community garden volunteer day. He taught music at a local high school and played guitar in a weekend band. His warm smile and thoughtful questions made my heart race in a way I hadn't experienced before. When he asked for my number, I gave it without hesitation. Our first date lasted 5 hours, starting with coffee and extending through an impromptu visit to a jazz club. Unlike the status-conscious men my mother had tried to set me up with in Connecticut, Lucas asked about my passions, my work, my dreams. "What made you move to Denver?" he asked, as we walked back to my apartment. I needed space to become myself. I answered, surprised by my own honesty. He nodded as if this made perfect sense. "And have you become yourself?" "I'm getting there," I said. and I was. Meanwhile, I'd started seeing my own therapist, Dr. Rachel Peters, who specialized in adult children of emotionally unavailable parents. Our weekly sessions helped me untangle the complex web of expectations, disappointments, and invisible rules that had defined my family relationships. "Your decision to move without telling them was significant," she observed during one session. "What were you hoping would happen?" "Part of me hoped they'd notice immediately and be concerned," I admitted. "Call hospitals, file a missing person report, something to show they cared. And the other part knew they wouldn't notice at all, and needed that confirmation to finally stop hoping for something different." 6 months into my Colorado life, I'd established routines that nourished rather than drained me. Morning yoga, overlooking the mountains. Work that felt meaningful. Evening walks with Lucas, or dinner with friends who knew my coffee order and birthday and the names of my childhood pets. My mother's messages continued, still oblivious to my relocation. My father never contacted me directly. Andrew sent a group text about engagement party details addressed to family and wedding party, not noticing or caring that I hadn't responded to previous wedding planning threads. On my 33rd birthday, a package arrived from Connecticut. Inside was a gift card to Giovanni's, an Italian restaurant chain exclusive to New England, and a card signed "Love Mom and Dad" in my mother's handwriting. No personal message. No acknowledgement of the milestone, and certainly no awareness that I couldn't possibly use their gift living 2,000 miles away. That evening, I brought the gift card to my therapy session. "This feels like final confirmation," I said, placing it on the small table between us. "Either they know I've moved and don't care enough to get me an appropriate gift, or they truly haven't noticed I'm gone after 8 months. Dr. Peters nodded. "And how does that make you feel?" I considered the question carefully. Liberated, I finally said, surprising myself. "I've been defining my worth through their validation my entire life. Their complete failure to notice my absence proves what I've suspected all along. I was never real to them. And if I was never real to them, then their opinion of me isn't real either. It's just a reflection of their own issues." "That's a powerful realization," Dr. Peters said. "It is," I agreed. "For the first time, I understand that my value isn't determined by their ability to see it." I left that session feeling lighter than I had in years, maybe ever. That night, Lucas and I celebrated my birthday with friends at a local restaurant. Jenna had arranged a cake. Drew gave me a book he'd noticed me admiring weeks earlier, and Lucas presented me with hiking boots for our planned weekend trips. These people who'd known me less than a year had paid more attention to who I really was than my family had in 3 decades. As we laughed and shared stories under string lights on the restaurant patio, I realized I'd found what I'd been looking for my entire life: visibility, acknowledgement, belonging. What I didn't know then was that my carefully constructed peace was about to be shattered with a single phone call. The call came on a Tuesday evening in early April. I was preparing dinner in my apartment, music playing softly in the background, when my phone lit up with my father's name. For a moment, I simply stared at it, my heart suddenly pounding. In 10 months, he hadn't called me once. Something must be wrong. I turned down the music and answered, "Hello, Maria." My father's voice was brisk, businesslike, as if we'd spoken yesterday instead of nearly a year ago. "I'm calling about Andrew's wedding. Your mother needs your measurements for the bridesmaid dress." No greeting. No, "How are you?" Not even a question about where I'd been or what I'd been doing. Just straight to his agenda as always. "The wedding is in June," he continued when I didn't immediately respond. "The 15th. I assume you've kept it clear on your calendar. The rehearsal dinner is the night before at the club." I leaned against my kitchen counter, trying to process what was happening. "Dad, I haven't spoken to anyone in the family in months." "Yes, well, you've always been independent. Now, about the dress. Your mother says you need to call the boutique directly. Stephanie has selected some ridiculous shade of blue that apparently needs to be ordered specially." The surreal nature of the conversation made me feel like I was floating outside my body. "Dad, I moved to Colorado 10 months ago." There was a pause, but not the shocked one I might have expected. Instead, it felt calculated, as if he were deciding how this information affected his plans. "Colorado," he finally said, his tone suggesting I'd said something mildly inconvenient rather than life-changing. "Why would you do that without telling anyone?" "I told you just now," I said, edge creeping into my voice. "And apparently that's 10 months later than you noticed." Don't be dramatic, Maria. You've always been secretive. Now about the wedding. You'll need to book your flight soon. Your mother wants all the bridesmaids to stay at the house the night before for some sort of preparation ritual Stephanie wants. The casual dismissal of my entire existence hit me like a physical blow. I'm not coming to the wedding, I said, the words escaping before I'd fully formed the thought. What now? He sounded truly surprised. I'm not coming to Andrew's wedding, I repeated more firmly this time. Don't be ridiculous. Of course you're coming. You're a bridesmaid. We need the whole family there. The Davises are inviting everyone who matters in the industry. We need to look perfect. There it was, the truth behind the call. Not concern for me, not a desire to include me in a family celebration, but the need to project the perfect family image to business associates. I haven't been part of this family for a long time, I said quietly. You just confirmed that by not noticing I moved across the country nearly a year ago. Maria, my father's voice, took on the warning tone I remembered from childhood. You're being childish. Whatever point you're trying to make can wait until after the wedding. This is about Andrew's future. No, I said, surprising myself with how calm I sounded. This is about me finally recognizing that I don't exist in this family, except when you need something from me. That's absurd, he snapped. We've given you everything. Paid for your education, supported your little therapy business. My little therapy business has been thriving in Colorado without any support from you, I interrupted. And you haven't given me anything that wasn't also an investment in how it made you look. I could practically hear his blood pressure rising through the phone. I don't have time for this nonsense. You will be at your brother's wedding. It's not a request. I'm sorry, but I won't be there. Maria listened to me very carefully. His voice dropped to the cold, controlled tone that had terrified me as a child. If you insist on this ridiculous rebellion, you can consider yourself cut off completely. No inheritance, no family connections, nothing. Is that really what you want, to throw away everything over some imagined slight? The threat hung between us, designed to bring me back in line as it had so many times before. In the past, the mere suggestion of disapproval would have been enough to make me acquiesce. But something had changed in me during those 10 months of freedom. You didn't notice I was gone for almost a year, I said softly. I don't think you'll miss me at the wedding. The silence that followed was profound. I could hear my father breathing on the other end of the line, but for perhaps the first time in my life, he seemed to have no words. The man who always controlled every conversation, who had the final say in every family decision, was speechless. After what felt like an eternity, I heard a sharp intake of breath. Then, without another word, he hung up. I stood in my kitchen phone, still pressed to my ear, listening to the disconnect tone. My hands were trembling, but not from fear. I felt strangely calm, as if I'd finally put down a burden I'd been carrying my entire life. I placed my phone on the counter and returned to chopping vegetables for dinner, knowing with absolute certainty that the silence wouldn't last. The storm was only beginning. The fallout was swift and overwhelming. My phone began ringing less than an hour after my conversation with my father. First my mother, then Andrew, then a series of extended family members I barely spoke to even when I lived in Connecticut. I let most calls go to voicemail, needing time to process what had happened. My mother's message was tearful and manipulative. How could you do this to us, Maria? To your brother? We've always supported you, and this is how you repay us, by trying to ruin Andrew's special day. Please call me back. Your father is furious. Andrew's message was shorter and angrier. What the hell, Maria, Dad's losing his mind. Mom's crying and Stephanie's freaking out about her wedding party numbers. Whatever your problem is, suck it up for one weekend. It's not always about you. The irony of that last statement would have been laughable if it weren't so painful. Aunt Patricia called to tell me I was breaking my mother's heart. Uncle James suggested I was being selfish. Cousin Samantha, who I hadn't spoken to in 3 years, texted that I was always trying to make everything about myself instead of supporting the family. By midnight, I had 17 missed calls, 23 text messages, and a growing sense of panic. Had I made a terrible mistake? Was I really being selfish? The old doubts crept in, the familiar feeling that I was somehow wrong for having needs or boundaries. I called Abby despite the late hour on the East Coast. They're all attacking me, I said when she answered, my voice breaking. Maybe I should just go to the wedding, keep the peace. Maria, Abby's voice was gentle but firm. Do you remember what you told me when you left, that you needed to find out if they would even notice you were gone? Yes, but And they didn't. For 10 months, they didn't notice or care that you moved across the country. They only contacted you when they needed you to play your role in their perfect family performance. I sank onto my couch, heart racing. But what if they're right? What if I am being selfish? Setting boundaries isn't selfish, Abby said. Think about what they're asking. Not for you to come celebrate Andrew's happiness, but to pretend to be someone you're not so they can impress business associates. They're not concerned about your feelings or your life. They're concerned about how your absence will look to others. She was right, of course. But decades of conditioning don't disappear overnight. I spent a sleepless night cycling through guilt, anger, and doubt, nearly booking a flight back to Connecticut around 3 a.m. before closing the browser window. The next day at work, I was distracted and anxious. Linda noticed immediately. "Everything okay?" she asked when I fumbled through an explanation of our group therapy schedule. "You seem a million miles away." "Family stuff," I said, attempting a smile. "Nothing to worry about." "Family stuff is always something to worry about," she replied kindly. "Take the afternoon if you need it. Your clients deserve your full attention, and so do you." I took her advice, canceling my afternoon appointments and walking to a nearby park. Sitting on a bench overlooking a small lake, I scrolled through the continuing barrage of messages from family members. My father had clearly mobilized everyone to pressure me into compliance. As I stared at my phone, a new message appeared from a number I didn't recognize. "Maria, this is Stephanie. Can we talk?" My brother's fiancé was possibly the last person I expected to hear from. We'd met only a handful of times at family events, exchanging pleasant but superficial conversation. I hesitated, then called the number. "Thank you for calling back," Stephanie said when she answered. Her voice was softer than I remembered. "I got your number from Andrew's phone. He doesn't know I'm calling you." "Is everything okay?" I asked cautiously. "Not really," she sighed. "Your family is in an uproar. Your father's been on the phone all day, your mother keeps crying, and Andrew is storming around swearing at everyone." "I'm sorry you're dealing with that," I said, genuinely meaning it. "But I'm not sure why you're calling me." There was a long pause before she responded. "Because I understand why you're not coming, and I wanted you to know that." Of all the responses I'd received, this was the most unexpected. "You do." "I've seen how they treat you," she said quietly. "The few times we've been at events together, I've noticed how they talk over you, dismiss your opinions, focus entirely on Andrew. It's like you're invisible in your own family." The simple acknowledgement of what I'd experienced my entire life brought tears to my eyes. "Thank you for saying that I managed. I wasn't sure anyone had noticed." "I noticed," she said. "And I understand why you moved away without telling them. Why you don't want to come back and pretend everything is fine for the wedding. Then why are you marrying into this family?" I couldn't help asking. "If you see how they are." Another long pause. "I love Andrew," she finally said. "And he's not like them, not really. He's been shaped by their expectations, but underneath, he's different. Or he can be." "I hope you're right," I said, unsure if I believed it. "I'm not calling to pressure you to come," she continued. "I just wanted you to know that someone sees you. And whatever you decide, I understand." After we hung up, I sat in the park for another hour processing our conversation. Stephanie's validation of my experience was like a cool drink after years of thirst. Someone had seen the truth of my family dynamics, not the carefully curated image my parents projected to the world. That evening, I received an email from my mother with wedding dettles in the subject line. The body contained flight information she'd tentatively booked for me, bridesmaid dress measurements they needed as soon as possible, and a schedule of pre-wedding events I was expected to attend. No acknowledgement of my move, my refusal, or the family drama that had ensued. Just marching orders as if my compliance was a foregone conclusion. I closed the email without responding, but my resolve was beginning to crumble under the sheer weight of family pressure. Maybe I could endure one weekend of pretense. Maybe I could push aside 33 years of invisible wounds for my brother's sake. Maybe the cost of standing my ground was higher than I was prepared to pay. As I wrestled with these thoughts, Lucas called to confirm our dinner plans. "Actually," I said, my voice shaking slightly, "I'm not feeling great tonight. Can we reschedule?" "Of course," he replied immediately. "But are you okay? You sound upset." I hesitated, then found myself explaining the entire situation. My family's dynamics, my move, the wedding drama, and my conflicting emotions about standing my ground versus giving in to keep the peace. When I finished, Lucas was quiet for a moment. "That's a lot to carry alone," he finally said. "What do you need right now?" The simple question caught me off guard. In my family, needs were never acknowledged, much less addressed. "I don't know," I admitted. Part of me wants to give in just to stop the pressure. But another part feels like if I do, I'll be erasing myself all over again. "Those both sound like valid feelings," he said. "But what do you want, Maria? Not what will make your family happy or what will stop the conflict. What outcome would make you feel like you've honored yourself?" I considered his question seriously. "I want to be seen," I said slowly. "Really seen. Not as a prop in their perfect family portrait, but as a person with my own life and choices. I don't want to pretend everything is fine when it isn't." "Then, I think you have your answer," Lucas said gently. That night I wrote a carefully worded email to my mother, officially declining the wedding invitation. I explained that I had built a new life in Colorado, one that fulfilled me in ways my family relationship never had. I acknowledged that my absence might complicate their wedding plans, but emphasized that I needed to prioritize my own well-being. I ended with "I wish Andrew and Stephanie happiness in their marriage. My decision isn't about punishing anyone, but about finally choosing myself after a lifetime of being overlooked. I hope someday you can understand that." I sent the email, then turned off my phone, giving myself permission to disconnect from the storm of reactions I knew would follow. The following morning, I woke to an unexpected silence. No missed calls, no new text messages. The absence of communication was almost more unnerving than the barrage had been. Had my email somehow ended the conflict? Had my family simply accepted my decision and moved on? I knew better, of course. This wasn't acceptance. It was tactical regrouping. Sure enough, when I checked social media later that day, I discovered the real response to my boundary setting. My mother had posted a series of family photos, including several recent ones that featured a woman who at first glance appeared to be me. Looking closer, I realized with a shock that they were old photos of me that had been digitally altered to make it seem like I'd attended recent family events. The caption read, "So proud of our family as we prepare for Andrew and Stephanie's wedding. Unfortunately, Maria will be missing the celebration due to an important work assignment overseas. We'll miss her presence, but understand her professional commitments." I stared at the post in disbelief. Rather than acknowledge my actual reasons for not attending or even the fact that I'd moved across the country without them noticing, my mother had created a complete fiction, one that made my absence about professional success, rather than family dysfunction, one that preserved their perfect image. Even more disturbing were the comments. "Such a shame Maria can't be there, but what an exciting opportunity for her. The family photo from Christmas looks so lovely. Maria hasn't changed a bit." Christmas, I zoomed in on the photo in question. It was from 2 years ago, but my mother had changed the background decorations and added a 2024 banner to make it appear recent. I felt physically ill. The extent of the deception was staggering. Not only had they failed to notice my absence for nearly a year, but they were now actively constructing an elaborate alternate reality rather than admit the truth. When I mentioned the discovery to Dr. Peters during our therapy session, she wasn't surprised. "This is classic image management," she explained. "For families built around appearances, the narrative is more important than the reality. They're not just trying to convince others, they're convincing themselves. Acknowledging your absence and its real causes would require them to examine dynamics they've spent decades establishing. It's easier to create a fiction. But it's so blatant," I said, still struggling to comprehend the scale of the deception. "They're literally photoshopping me into family events. Because in their minds, the role you play in the family is more important than your actual presence," she replied. "You exist as a concept to them, not as an independent person with needs and feelings." The realization was both painful and liberating. If I existed only as a concept to my family, then their approval or disapproval had nothing to do with who I actually was. Their reactions weren't about me at all, but about the disruption to their carefully constructed narrative. In the following days, I immersed myself in work and my Colorado life. I went hiking with Jenna, enjoyed dinner with Lucas, and focused on my clients. But the wedding situation lingered in the back of my mind, a persistent ache that demanded resolution. One evening, sitting on my balcony watching the sunset paint the distant mountains gold and pink, I began writing a letter to Andrew. Not an email, but an actual handwritten letter on thick stationery I purchased specifically for this purpose. I didn't expect forgiveness or even understanding. I simply wanted to express my truth clearly and compassionately without the distortions of family dynamics or social media fictions. Dear Andrew, I wrote, I'm writing to explain my decision not to attend your wedding in my own words without the interference or interpretations of others. I wrote about our childhood, about the different ways our parents' expectations had shaped us, both about my growing invisibility in the family and my eventual decision to start fresh in Colorado. I acknowledged that my absence might hurt him, but explained that returning to Connecticut to play my assigned role would hurt me more deeply than he could understand. I don't expect you to choose sides, or even to fully understand my perspective, I concluded. I simply want you to hear the truth directly from me, rather than the fiction our parents have created. I wish you and Stephanie genuine happiness. Despite everything, you are still my brother and I still care about you. I sealed the letter, addressed the envelope, but didn't immediately send it. Something held me back, not doubt about my position, but a sense that more needed to be said or done before this chapter could close. The next day brought an unexpected development. A large package arrived at my apartment from my childhood home in Connecticut. Inside were random items from my old bedroom yearbooks, academic awards, childhood stuffed animals, and photo albums I'd left behind. Things I'd never said I wanted to discard. A brief note in my mother's handwriting read, Since you've chosen to distance yourself from this family, we assumed you no longer wanted these things. We're clearing out your room to make space for wedding gifts. The casualness of the note belied its cruelty. This wasn't about storage space. It was punishment, a physical manifestation of my father's threat to cut me off completely. They were erasing me from the family home just as they'd erased my actual absence from their social media narrative. I sat on my living room floor, surrounded by fragments of my past, and felt an unexpected sense of calm. They were returning my history to me, thinking it would hurt, not realizing they were actually freeing me from the last physical ties to their control. Among the items was a journal I'd kept during high school documenting years of small dismissals and overlooked achievements. Reading it as an adult with professional training in family psychology, I saw the pattern so clearly, not individual slights, but a systematic devaluation that had shaped my self-perception. I took the journal to my next therapy session. I've been questioning whether I'm overreacting, I told Dr. Peters. Whether one wedding is worth all this conflict. But reading this, I gestured to the journal. I can see it wasn't one event or one slight. It was my entire existence in that family. What does that realization tell you about your decision? She asked. That it isn't about the wedding at all, I said slowly. The wedding is just the breaking point. This is about whether I'm willing to continue participating in a family system that requires my invisibility to function. I left that session with renewed clarity and purpose. That evening I added a postscript to my letter to Andrew, then finally mailed it. I also composed responses to the extended family members who had reached out, explaining my position calmly but firmly, without apology. To my surprise, my cousin Samantha replied with unexpected support. I never really understood your relationship with Uncle Thomas and Aunt Eleanor, but some of what you described sounds familiar. Stay strong. Family should see you, not just use you. This small gesture of understanding from an unexpected source strengthened my resolve. I wasn't crazy or selfish or overreacting. The dynamics I'd experienced were real, and at least one other person in the extended family had observed them. As the wedding date drew closer, the pressure increased again. My father had apparently given up on direct communication, but my mother sent daily emails with increasing urgency about bridesmaid dresses and pre-wedding events, as if my refusal had never happened. Andrew left terse voicemails. Mom's a wreck over this. Just call her, will you? And the seating arrangements are a nightmare now. Stephanie's cousin has to step in as a bridesmaid. Is that what you wanted? I didn't respond to any of these communications, maintaining the boundary I'd set. Instead, I focused on building my new life. I took on additional clients at the wellness center, started volunteering at a local youth center, and deepened my relationship with Lucas. I'm proud of you, he told me one evening as we cooked dinner together in my apartment. Standing your ground like this can't be easy. It's not, I admitted, chopping vegetables with perhaps more force than necessary. Part of me still feels guilty, like I'm abandoning my brother on his important day. From what you've told me, they abandoned you long before you left Connecticut, Lucas said gently. You're just finally acknowledging what was already true. His words resonated deeply. I wasn't creating a rupture in my family. I was simply revealing one that had existed for decades beneath the veneer of perfection. 3 days before the wedding, everything changed. I returned home from work to find a text message waiting on my phone, one that would shatter the fragile peace I'd constructed and force a confrontation I wasn't prepared for. The text message was simple but shocking. "I'm at Denver International. Can I come see you, Andrew?" I stared at my phone in disbelief. My brother was in Denver, without telling anyone, 3 days before his wedding. None of it made sense. I called him immediately. "Andrew, are you really in Denver?" "Yeah," he sounded tired and tense. "Just landed." "Can I come to your place? I got the address from the package Mom sent you." Of course, I said, too surprised to question why he was here. "I'll text you the exact address. Do you need me to pick you up?" "No, I'll get a car." He paused. "Don't tell Mom and Dad I'm here. Please." "I haven't been telling them anything for nearly a year," I reminded him. "Why would I start now?" He didn't laugh at my attempt at humor. "I'll see you soon." I spent the next hour in a state of anxious anticipation, straightening my already tidy apartment and trying to predict what this visit could possibly mean. Had Andrew come to persuade me to attend the wedding to express his anger in person, or something else entirely? When the knock finally came, I opened the door to find my brother looking nothing like the confident, polished businessman from my parents' social media posts. His face was drawn, his normally immaculate appearance rumpled from travel. He carried only a small backpack. "Nice place," he said, glancing around my apartment. "Very. You." I wasn't sure if it was a compliment or criticism. "Thanks. Can I get you something to drink, coffee, water, something stronger?" "Stronger," he said, decisively dropping his backpack by the couch. "If you have it." I poured us both glasses of whiskey, my hand trembling slightly. We sat on opposite ends of my couch, the tension between us palpable. "Why are you here, Andrew?" I finally asked when he made no move to explain his presence. "Your wedding is in 3 days." He took a long sip of his drink before answering. "I read your letter." "Oh." I'd almost forgotten about the letter I'd sent weeks ago, having received no acknowledgement. "Is it true," he asked, looking directly at me for the first time since arriving, "that you moved to Colorado 10 months ago and no one noticed?" I nodded. "Yes." "And that's why you won't come to the wedding, because we didn't notice you were gone." His simplification of my reasoning sparked something in me. "No, Andrew. I'm not coming to the wedding because for my entire life I've been invisible in our family except when needed for appearances. The fact that no one noticed I moved across the country isn't the problem. It's just the most obvious symptom." He flinched at my directness. "That's not fair. We've all been busy. I've been planning a wedding, running the business." "Too busy to notice your sister moved to another state," I interrupted. "For 10 months. Be honest with yourself, if not with me." Andrew drained his glass and set it down hard on the coffee table. "So this is some kind of punishment, making a scene right before my wedding to get back at us for not paying enough attention to you." His accusation ignited years of suppressed anger. "This isn't about you, Andrew. That's the whole point. Everything in our family has always been about you. Your achievements, your future, your wedding. I've spent my entire life being a supporting character in the Andrew show, and when I finally decided to write my own story, no one even noticed I was gone." "That's not true," he protested, but his voice lacked conviction. "We notice you. We care about you." When was the last time either of our parents asked me a question about my life, my work, my dreams? When was the last time you did? He opened his mouth to respond, then closed it, unable to produce an example. "Exactly," I said, suddenly exhausted. "Look, I don't blame you for how our parents raised us. You didn't ask to be the golden child any more than I asked to be invisible, but I won't pretend anymore. I can't." Andrew stood and walked to the window, staring out at the Denver skyline now illuminated with evening lights. "Do you know what Dad said when I told him I wanted to go into music instead of real estate?" The abrupt change of subject caught me off guard. "No." "He said he wouldn't pay for college if I pursued such a hobbyist career. Said I'd be wasting my potential and embarrassing the family." Andrew's voice was flat. "So I gave up music, got a business degree, and joined the company like he wanted." I'd had no idea. In our family, certain subjects were simply never discussed, and apparently Andrew's dreams had been one of them. "I'm sorry," I said softly. "I didn't know." "How could you? We don't talk about real things in our family." He turned back to face me. "I envy you, you know, for having the courage to leave. To build something that's actually yours. His admission stunned me. You're the successful one, Andrew. The one they're proud of. I'm the compliant one, he corrected. The one who does what they expect without question. That's not the same as success. We fell into silence, the revelation shifting something fundamental between us. For the first time, I saw my brother not as my parents' favored child, but as another victim of their rigid expectations, albeit in a different way. Are you happy, Andrew? I asked quietly. With Dad's company, with the life you've built. He considered the question with surprising seriousness. Parts of it. I'm good at business, as it turns out. And I love Stephanie. She sees me clearly somehow, even when I can't see myself. She called me, I told him. After everything blew up with Dad, she was kind, understanding. Said she'd noticed how they treat me. Andrew nodded. She's been pushing me to establish more boundaries with Mom and Dad. She says their level of involvement in our lives isn't healthy. Smart woman, I said. You should listen to her. I'm trying, he sighed heavily. But it's hard to break 30 years of conditioning. You know that better than anyone. I refilled our glasses, sensing we both needed it. So what happens now? Why are you really here, Andrew? He took a deep breath. I want you to come to the wedding. My heart sank. After our moment of connection, we were back to the same demand. Andrew, not for Mom and Dad, he interrupted. For me, and for yourself. What do you mean? I mean, come on your terms. Not as the perfect daughter in the perfect bridesmaid dress playing the perfect family role. Come as Maria, my sister, who built a life for herself in Colorado. Who stands up for herself even when it's hard. He leaned forward earnestly. I need someone in my corner who understands what it's like in our family. Someone who can help me set boundaries even when I'm tempted to cave. I was speechless. This was not the conversation I'd expected to have when Andrew showed up at my door. Before I could formulate a response, both our phones chimed simultaneously. We exchanged a look of confusion before checking the messages. My screen displayed a text from my father. Your brother is missing. If you've poisoned him against this wedding, you'll never be welcome in this family again. Andrew's face paled as he read the same message. How did he know I'm in Denver? Location tracking, I realized aloud. He's tracking your phone. That's not possible, Andrew protested. I never gave him permission to. When did you get your phone? I asked, already guessing the answer. Company phone, he admitted. Dad set everything up. The implications hit us both simultaneously. Our father had been monitoring Andrew's movements without his knowledge or consent. The invasion of privacy was staggering. This is insane, Andrew whispered, staring at his phone as if it had betrayed him. I'm 30 years old, about to get married, and my father is tracking me like a teenager breaking curfew. Now do you understand why I left? I asked gently. Andrew nodded slowly. I think I'm starting to. Andrew stayed on my couch that night, neither of us quite ready to address what would happen next. In the morning, I woke to the smell of coffee and found him sitting on my balcony staring at the mountains. I've been thinking all night, he said when I joined him. About our family, the wedding, everything. And I cradled my coffee mug, unsure what to expect. I still want to marry Stephanie, he said firmly. But not like this. Not with Mom and Dad controlling every aspect, using our wedding as a business networking event, tracking my movements without my knowledge. He looked at me, determination in his eyes. I need to establish boundaries, and I need to do it now, before I bring Stephanie fully into this dysfunction. What are you thinking? I asked. I want to go back and have the wedding, but on our terms. He took a deep breath. And I want you there with me. Not as a bridesmaid in whatever ridiculous dress Mom picked out, but as my sister supporting me while I finally stand up to them. His request touched something deep in me. For the first time, Andrew wasn't asking me to conform to our parents' expectations, but to help him break free of them. Are you sure? I asked. This won't be easy. Dad doesn't handle defiance well. Andrew laughed without humor. Believe me, I know. But I'm done letting fear of his reaction control my life. And Stephanie deserves better than to marry into a family where appearances matter more than people. We spent the morning making plans. Andrew called Stephanie, explaining everything. To her credit, she was fully supportive, relieved that Andrew was finally setting boundaries with his parents. I told you she sees the real me, Andrew said after hanging up a note of pride in his voice. I booked flights for us, both returning to Connecticut the following day. Not to surrender to my family's demands, but to support my brother as he found his voice. It wasn't the reason I'd expected to return, but it felt right in a way I couldn't have anticipated. That evening, Lucas came over to meet Andrew. The two men got along immediately, discussing music and hiking trails and Denver's best breweries. Watching them, I realized how much had changed. I'd left Connecticut feeling invisible and insignificant. Now I was returning with purpose, with allies, with a clear understanding of my own worth. "You're different," Andrew observed after Lucas left. "More confident. More present." "Colorado has been good for me," I said. "Or maybe being away from our family's expectations has been good for me." "I'm sorry I didn't see what was happening," he said quietly. "How they treated you. How I participated in it." "We were both doing what we'd been trained to do," I replied. "You to accept the spotlight, me to retreat into the shadows." The next morning, we boarded a plane to Connecticut. Neither of us entirely sure what awaited us, but both committed to facing it together. Andrew had turned off his phone's location services and texted our father only that he was returning and would explain everything when he arrived. When we landed at Bradley International, I felt a familiar tightness in my chest. Connecticut represented everything I'd fled from: invisibility, conditional love, suffocating expectations. But with Andrew beside me, somehow the weight seemed bearable. We rented a car rather than having our parents pick us up, preserving our independence for as long as possible. The drive to Greenwich was tense with anticipation. "What exactly are you going to say to them?" I asked as we neared our parents' neighborhood. "The truth," Andrew replied, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. "That I'm getting married because I love Stephanie, not to advance Dad's business interests. That we want a celebration focused on our relationship, not on impressing industry contacts. And that you're attending as my sister, not as a prop in their perfect family portrait." "They won't take it well," I warned. "Probably not," he agreed. "But I'm done sacrificing my happiness and authenticity for their approval." The Georgian columns of our childhood home came into view, the house just as imposing as I remembered. Andrew parked in the circular driveway, and we sat for a moment, gathering courage. "Ready?" he asked. "As I'll ever be." Our mother opened the door before we could ring the bell, her relief at seeing Andrew quickly turning to shock when she noticed me standing beside him. "Maria, what are you doing here, Andrew? What is going on?" Her perfectly coiffed appearance couldn't hide her agitation. "Your father has been beside himself. The rehearsal dinner is tomorrow, and you just disappeared." "We need to talk," Mom, Andrew said, firmly guiding me past her into the foyer. "Where's Dad?" "In his study, but..." "Good. We'll all talk there." My father's surprise at our joint appearance quickly morphed into cold anger. "So this is where you've been," he said to Andrew, "conspiring with your sister to disrupt the wedding." "I went to see Maria because I wanted to understand why she moved across the country without telling anyone," Andrew replied evenly. "And why no one in this family noticed she was gone for almost a year." "That's ridiculous," my mother interjected. "Of course, we noticed. Maria has always been independent, always done her own thing." "Did you know she was in Colorado?" Andrew challenged. "Did either of you know she's built an entire new life there? That she has her own therapy practice, new friends, even a relationship?" My parents exchanged quick glances that confirmed everything. "What matters now is the wedding," my father said dismissively. "Stephanie's parents are expecting a certain level of..." "What matters now," Andrew interrupted, "is that we're going to do things differently moving forward, starting with this wedding." What followed was the most honest conversation our family had ever had. Andrew outlined his boundaries clearly. The wedding would celebrate his and Stephanie's relationship, not serve as a business networking event. He would no longer tolerate our father tracking his movements or monitoring his communications. And most importantly, I would be welcomed at the wedding on my terms, not as a bridesmaid in the perfect family portrait, but as his sister. "And if you can't accept these terms," he concluded, "Stephanie and I will get married at the courthouse instead." The threat of public embarrassment, having to explain to business associates why the elaborate wedding had been canceled, was perhaps the only leverage that could have worked with our father. "This is emotional blackmail," he accused. "No," I said, finding my voice. "This is your adult children asking to be treated with basic respect and dignity." My father's gaze when he turned to me was arctic. "You've been gone for nearly a year without a word, and now you return to make demands. You're dead to this family as far as I'm concerned." The words were designed to wound, to bring me back in line through fear of rejection. But something miraculous happened. They didn't hurt. Not because I didn't care about my family, but because I'd finally internalized that my father's approval was not the measure of my worth. "I'm sorry you feel that way," I said calmly. "But I'm here to support Andrew, and I'll be at his wedding whether you acknowledge me or not." My mother, perhaps sensing that her usual tactics of tears and guilt wouldn't work, tried a different approach. "Maria, darling, of course we want you at the wedding. But the bridesmaid dresses have already been fitted, the ceremony rehearsed. Stephanie's cousin has stepped in." "I'm not here to be a bridesmaid," I explained. "I'm here as Andrew's sister to celebrate his marriage to Stephanie. Nothing more, nothing less." The negotiations continued for hours, with my father alternating between cold fury and calculating pragmatism. In the end, Andrew's determination and the looming threat of a cancelled wedding forced a reluctant compromise. The wedding would proceed with me attending as a guest rather than a bridesmaid. Andrew managed to scale back some of the more obvious business networking aspects, though not eliminate them entirely. And most importantly, he made it clear that after the wedding, he and Stephanie would be establishing firmer boundaries around their marriage and family life. The actual wedding day dawned bright and clear. I wore a simple blue dress I'd purchased in Denver, my hair styled naturally, my makeup minimal. I looked nothing like the carefully curated daughter my mother would have preferred, but I felt authentic in a way I never had at family events. As I entered the church, several guests did double takes clearly, having been told the fiction about my overseas work assignment. My mother, impeccable in designer silk, grimaced when she saw my outfit, but said nothing. My father simply pretended I wasn't there. The ceremony itself was beautiful. Whatever their flaws, my parents excelled at creating perfect appearances, and the church was transformed with cascading flowers and string quartets. Andrew looked happier than I'd seen him in years, as Stephanie walked down the aisle, and their vows to each other felt genuine and heartfelt. At the reception, I was seated at a table far from the family, another small punishment from my mother. But it backfired when I found myself among Stephanie's cousins, who were welcoming and curious about my life in Colorado. For once at a family event, I had real conversations instead of performing the role of perfect daughter. The inevitable confrontation came during the reception when my mother created a scene about my refusal to participate in the family photos. "Why are you doing this to us?" she hissed, pulling me aside near the restrooms. "Why must you always make everything so difficult?" Several guests turned to watch, sensing drama. My mother, realizing she'd drawn unwanted attention, immediately plastered on a social smile while continuing to berate me in lowered tones. In that moment, I saw with perfect clarity the pattern that had defined our relationship for decades. My mother's concern was never about my feelings or well-being, but about how my actions might reflect on her. "Mom," I said quietly but firmly, "I'm not doing anything to you. I'm simply living my life authentically. I'm sorry that threatens the image you've worked so hard to maintain, but I can't keep pretending to be someone I'm not." "After everything we've done for you," she began, but I gently cut her off. "I know you believe you've given me everything, and materially you have. But what I needed most was to be seen and valued for who I actually am, not for how well I could play the role assigned to me." My mother's expression flickered between anger and something else, perhaps the first glimmer of recognition that she might have missed something important about her daughter. The moment was interrupted when my father approached, clearly irritated by what he perceived as another disruption. "Your mother and I have put together a perfect day for your brother," he said coldly. "The least you could do is not ruin it with your selfishness." I took a deep breath, centering myself before responding. "I don't need your approval or your inheritance," I said calmly. "I've built my own life, and I'm happier than I've ever been. I'm here for Andrew, not for you." My father froze, clearly unprepared for this response. In all our previous conflicts, the threat of his disapproval had been enough to bring me back in line. But now, standing before him as an independent adult who had built a life without his support or validation, I was immune to his usual tactics. For a moment, I glimpsed uncertainty in his eyes, perhaps the first time he'd ever had to consider that his control over me was not absolute. Then his expression hardened again, and without another word, he turned and walked away. My mother hesitated, caught between following him and continuing our conversation. "This isn't over, Maria," she finally said, her voice lacking its usual conviction. Then she too departed, leaving me standing alone by the restrooms, feeling strangely peaceful. The remainder of the reception passed in a blur of champagne toasts and cake cutting. Andrew and Stephanie made a point of seeking me out, both of them thanking me for coming despite everything. "You gave me courage," Andrew murmured as he hugged me goodbye before leaving for their honeymoon. I couldn't have stood up to them without seeing you do it first. I returned to Colorado the following day, declining my mother's perfunctory invitation to stay longer. As the plane lifted off from Connecticut soil, I felt a sense of completion. I had returned not as the invisible daughter desperate for validation, but as a whole person secure in her own worth. In the months that followed, my relationship with my family shifted into something new and still evolving. My father maintained his position that I was dead to him, though Andrew reported that he occasionally asked about my life in grudging, roundabout ways. My mother surprised me by sending a brief email inquiring about my practice in Denver, the first time she'd ever expressed interest in my work. When I responded with genuine details about my clients and approach, she replied with tentative questions that suggested she might be trying in her limited way to actually see me. 6 months after the wedding, I received a letter, not an email, but an actual handwritten letter from my mother. Inside, she explained that she had started seeing a therapist herself, prompted partly by the wedding confrontation and partly by concerns from friends who had witnessed our interaction at the reception. I don't understand many of your choices, she wrote, but I am trying to understand that they are yours to make. Perhaps someday we might have a relationship based on who we actually are, rather than who we've pretended to be. It wasn't an apology exactly, but it was a beginning. A small crack in the perfect facade that had defined our family for generations. As for me, I continued building my life in Denver. My therapy practice thrived, specializing in helping clients establish healthy boundaries with family members. My relationship with Lucas deepened, rooted in mutual respect and genuine visibility. And my friendship with Andrew and Stephanie grew stronger as they navigated their own journey toward authenticity within our complicated family. The invisibility that had defined my childhood ultimately became my greatest teacher. It showed me that real family isn't about blood or obligation or appearances, but about being truly seen and accepted. It taught me that sometimes walking away is the strongest move you can make, and that healing comes not from changing others, but from valuing yourself enough to demand better. Have you ever had to walk away from something familiar to find yourself, or set boundaries with family that were painful but necessary? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. Sometimes the hardest choices lead to the greatest growth, and sharing our experiences can help others find the courage to choose themselves too. If this story resonated with you, please like and subscribe for more content about family dynamics, healing, and personal growth. And if you know someone who might need to hear this message, please share it with them. We all deserve to be truly seen. Thank you for listening to my journey. Remember that your worth isn't determined by others' ability to recognize it. It exists unchanging and complete within you.